Today we are going to talk about some really controversial subjects that have been hitting the media for quite a while. I mean, the issue of rape and sexual coercion. It really hits the media and it makes a big splash. When it does. We had the incident with the Roman Catholic Church where they found out that tens of thousands of young boys were actually raped. They were not at the age of consent. We are seeing some news coming out of black churches, and I even have to say it from the black churches. It doesn't hit the fan, very, very hard. But we seeing some incidents where there's this talking now of if you are drunk, rape and that type of issue. And we had a case that made the court, be at some college, or actually I think it was some high school guys, that made the news. People getting drunk at parties, and then they just, sex happens. Because, it gets really, controversial at certain points. And, I really want to hear your perspective on it.
Well, I think, multiple people can have perspectives on it. This affects our whole society, right? That's what rape culture is. And to a degree, I feel like it, oppresses men to an extent, right? You have to display this over-aggression and take a very possessive role over women's bodies and their spaces. Men are confused, about their own signals, about even what is sexual attraction. So I think the same way racism corrupts the minds of white people as well as blacks, rape culture, harms both men and women, not only in terms of, okay, if you're trying to move like men are the perpetrator, women are the victim, to a more nuanced perspective about we're all being victims in that. And so there are cases where, men are sexually assaulted. There's a lot of molestation of young boys that happens sometimes even from their own parents, their own mothers. Although predominantly, the stats are for, every 3 women have been either a victim of sexual assault or sexual harassment, and that number is higher for women of color.
Right. And, hearing all that, that's like a lot of the news articles I've heard growing up. Because everything she's saying, I remember when it impacted, like you went through the history of the scares that we've been hearing about, of things that are happening widespread in certain institutions, and then it'd be validated in news articles, and the shock that went around, how long the conversations went on around the office after these events, not openly, not at meetings, but it was on everyone's hearts. So in the same way it's on my heart right now, that's my relationship with the culture, because I didn't know that growing up.
Right.
But then I have so much compassion for people who've been through this that I would come and put myself on TV to openly speak about it, because we got to hear about the solutions, and these things are coming out,
Yeah, I can recall the first time I actually met someone that told me that they had been raped, and I'm being really, really honest. Up until that point, meaning I had a great life growing up in Barbados.
Yeah.
When I was sent here to live, I wasn't too pleased. I lost contact with my friends and started thinking I had this really, really terrible life because I was cut off from my homeland. Maybe saying that my upbringing was terrible was a way for me to forget it, and I was trying to forget Barbados, but I was using it as like, my upbringing there was bad, my life was bad. And somebody told me that they got raped, and I was like, my life is really good. And I'm saying that because for me, like, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. I start feeling sorry for myself. How can you be raped and still okay, still functioning, still walking, still talking? For me, and I'm being honest, maybe this is the Aries in me, maybe this is the ancient traditional African in me. You're not going to live. If you don't go to jail and get beat up really badly, you're not going to live. So when a woman, is telling me that she's being raped, and I'm like, damn, well, my life wasn't that bad. I started remembering the beaches and all that stuff, and the fact that I've never had sexual encounters of coercion with older people, male or female. So I was like, yo, I've had a great life. That one thing made me say and look past a lot of the obstacles I had as a child.
Wow.
So when we talk about rape culture, then what are the things that, you know, influence that? What does that look like? And so some of the things that help rape culture thrive is the same thing that helps racism thrive: sexism, classism, making the person other or making them a thing. So it's easy to oppress black folks because they're mules. So they're supposed to be doing this work. That's their role. You dehumanize them. So when women talk about the objectification of women, they're not screaming like, oh, you're only thinking about me and my ass or tits or that kind of thing. It's what the situation is. If you only think of me as my body parts, then my only use to you is for your pleasure.
Right.
It's not for being a full human being. And that's
Right.
certain things that incites rape culture, because you're no longer a human. If you hear some of the analogies, and you know, I appreciate Lil Wayne for a lot of different things, you know, and for a lot of reasons. So his song Georgia Bush is still revolutionary.
Yeah.
But if you hear some of his analogies, the way he talks about, you know, beating up, you know, women's insides, or we hear somebody's busting out someone's ovaries, you know, somebody has to deal with
and that's what makes me think. It's like
a human being.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is how
really
it appears.
Very interesting.
Yeah, because that's how it appears today. But let's talk about the traditional man. The emotion and the reaction that I get from first hearing about rape and thinking about first being exposed to the fact that there is a culture out there.
Right.
You know? So it's like, with that said, it's like, what is my reaction more so?
Right.
You know? And
Do you see that culture in your life, like when rape culture? Are there some ways that you recognize it? What does that?
what happened is that I heard, from what I heard you describe as rape culture, that's what made me realize that this was the first time I was exposed to it, because my reaction doesn't fall into the spectrum, you know. So it's like, I'm not the male who's trying to make up nice new lyrics to describe women only their body. I'm concerned with their development. I've always been concerned with their development.
Right.
And any music that expresses that, I like that music.
Oh.
And that's why I listen to certain funny types of music.
Right.
But then I also listen to hip hop too, because I feel hip hop has captured that at certain stages.
Right.
And you know, and people are trying to
hip
bring that
hop's
into
powerful,
the future.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
because we need that traditional voice, because that's the voice that I'm thinking and speaking
Right.
from. You know, myself.
You know, I'm really glad that you made that point. You know, a lot of people might not know on the show. You know, at one point in my life, I joined a very, very strict, what you might call religious order group, AKA. And so, you know, I didn't listen to, you know, hip hop or rap. It was mainly what people might call spiritual music and stuff like that. But you know, after that point in my life had expired, I started to reintroduce myself first. You know, listen to Native American music, you know, flutes, you know, chants, and you know, shamanic music and stuff like that. Then, you know, when I started to check out music again, it was very clear which artists I was not going to be listening to. And you know, if you were, you know, saying certain things about how you treat a woman, you know, if you were saying certain things about even how you behave, and it didn't corroborate with this is a just mission, I'm doing this because, you know, meaning like I'm big on reggae music, I'm big on dancehall. In dancehall, sometimes they get really revolutionary, like, you know, down with the Pope, down with the Vatican, burn it down. But you know, we talking about rape culture and the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church. One of the issues that we have as a people who have, you know, really been through colonialism, as we trace our history as far back as ancient Africa and the Crusades, and you know how we lost certain, you know, areas and lands. We retreat to, you know, Eritrea. We retreat to, you know, Ethiopia. We retreat to the Coptic Church. You know, we retreat to the bloodline of Tehutemash. That's King David. And you get that Rastafarianism that is strict. You can't sing bad music. And I was a fundamentalist like that. So when I'm hearing you talking about the Lil Wayne, what I'm hearing is how that influences rape culture. And this has to be honest, because I was very, very disappointed when I heard artists saying things like, I'm not a role model. What makes you a role model is you saying or gesturing something and how many people see you. Because what people can't realize is how you mathematically determine things that you define. You are a role model. A lot of people are hearing your music and they're being influenced to it because it has a nice beat, period. The fact that a lot of Americans can't differentiate it and say, my daughter's son can't listen to that, because that few music can never play in my house.
And something else that folks have been talking about recently is the Black Panties album by R. Kelly. And the reason they were talking about it, and a lot of women were reposting this, but there was a kind of DT, a private DT at the Chicago Times, and basically his whole thing was doing stories about R. Kelly's, escapades and the allegations that have been brought up against him from young girls. And there was one young girl who was in a choir, was kind of he was with this young girl, and she was helping bring him other underage girls so he could be with them, and they were forced to be together also. And when he didn't want her anymore, she was getting older, 16, 17, because they were 14 when it started, he kind of pushed her to the side. She slit her wrist.
Wow.
And so, her mother, what this guy said at the end, which is powerful, he said, one thing I've learned about my investigation into this, nobody cares about young Black women. And I mean nobody. So I'm not saying we do, and there are people that do. What he was trying to get at was the justice system also helps perpetuate rape culture for particular groups. So if there's a case where, if the woman is white, it's treated a little bit differently. It's a young Black girl, she has a big booty, she was being, the Venus Hottentot, she was being sexually suggestive. Why was she looking like that? She must want it. Black women have this unbridled sexuality, they're asking for it. That's still participating in rape culture.
The over-sexualization of the Black female in America is a thing that I'm very familiar with.
And the Black men, both.
And the Black man, and how this, goes back to the days of slavery, colonialism, because, a lot of people we might tend to talk about current social issues, but here, part of the album is getting into the, history. Mentioning the Roman Catholic Church and rape culture is a big experience among indigenous people, meaning that when the conquerors came and the missionaries came, the missionaries would come first. They would come to investigate the population. Yeah. This is historical fact. It was usually the warrior caste that said these people are no good. In many cases, it was the kings and the queens. Somehow, they didn't realize that these people were up to no good. Like you can study the history of Hispaniola, which is now, DR and the Caciques. This is an official history books. I was reading certain things by Jomo Kenyatta and the Mao and that movement. And they were talking about how, when the Caucasian first came, but and also when you study the cosmologies of indigenous people around the world, who collects these cosmologies are actually missionaries sent by the Roman Catholic Church.
Wow.
Now, this is how I was learning the cosmologies of indigenous people globally. This information was collected by missionaries. They were going first. Then the conquerors came. Then the missionaries came back with the conquerors as the papacy, the male, and that happened too.
And so that influenced rape culture by...
It's a continuation. Like what we are seeing is a continuation.
Dehumanization. Right.
Yeah. And and I have to say, I have love for all mankind. I judge you by, what you do, right or wrong. I stay indigenous. I go to divination when it becomes serious. When things are very, very clear, that was wrong. You want to go into people's country and even take over, you don't have to rape them. You absolutely don't.
And that's the question. It's that it goes back. Let's get to the solutions also. We go back to history. we look at that it began in history, and it continues through history, and we're all being affected by it now. And the assumption is that, okay, why are you talking about history so much? Maybe because you want to talk about the beginnings, because if we speak about the beginnings, then we can speak about the ending of it. So how do we end that in this modern age? And as you said, I have to say, I have had cries for justice. This is what's made me delve deeper into this topic. So I know a lot about the information you're speaking about, you know? So where are the answers coming from?
Wow, man. I mean, I know that people need an alchemical social contract based on the current paradigm as it relates to certain historical climaxes in human civilization evolution, and in many ways we are quagmired and in conflict in general as a people, because rape culture now, we're not talking what the conquerors are doing against the conquered, because I was very glad I was at a conference to hear what you would call a Caucasian and white lady said, it was better before the conqueror came. These people had better cultures and ways of life. Yeah, and this is true, and it's been proven. There are many civilizations, and this was the other thing. Another thing that was very big about a lot of the indigenous civilizations that I was reading about, they have a rape culture. Now, Africa, we talk globally, Africa is a very, very huge continent, and the history of the ups and downs of civilizations and the incursions in and out is really, really, really problematic to decipher, meaning that I also read a book, and what this book was, it wasn't written by a black man, okay. It was written by a Caucasian man. This book is huge. I have this book. My best friend gave me this book to say, listen, you got to see what's going on in Africa amongst these people that are considered indigenous and practitioners of, so-called voodoo or indigenous African culture. And it was very ugly. It was extremely ugly. I was like, that's not the Africa that I know.
In terms of some of the solutions, I think it's also the way that we treat relationships. If we take the taboo out of relationships,
right.
The way that a friend of mine, Nana Bakan, was talking about sexuality and spirituality is on the same spectrum. And so, it's placing sexuality back on, the pillar akin to spirituality and access to the divine, and correcting that. We learn by touching. We learn by loving. You talk about love being that, connecting force in the universe that helps keep us together. And if the thing that connects us all is criminalized, is, kind of saturated with all this misinformation, that messes up the way that we're connected in general. So you have societies, a friend of coworker he's from Panama. He says
sex was criminalized. Do you all know that? I mean, you just hit it.
Absolutely, there were
Wow.
various kinds of sex criminalized. But I had a coworker that was sharing. He's from Panama, and he was like, we have little babies going, like our girls walk around in her shorts, and young girls with no top. They're young. Nobody's looking at young girls that way. In his culture, you don't look at the woman until she's fully maturated. I don't care if she's showing some little knob. You're not looking at her that way. And so when have we all of a sudden made that body criminal, made that body sexual? And I do
made
think
it open for public consumption, whoever feels like they can take it, because that's really at the
Right.
heart of the matter. I mean,
right, but just to the solution part, just to
Yeah.
focus on that. If we change the way that we've been thinking about sexuality, and I do think, and I'm going to be controversial, with all the sexting and the wieners and the spitzers that's come out, it's made sex less taboo. The WhatsApp, the pictures that you send, it's less
making
criminal.
sex
The
less
twerking,
taboo.
it makes it a little less taboo, so people can elevate it to one, how are we having sex? It's not something to be ashamed of. And if you want a particular practice, either you do it over there and leave the little girls alone, like you can go over there and you're with these people who are maybe dressing up as little girls, but they're fully maturated adult women, and you can role play in your dungeon. Cool, keep it out of the society. But if you're saying no, this can't exist, then they go in their little closets and sneak and do it. So being out in the open is the solution.
And you're making me think about my earliest, you could say, experience with sex. So every young person may have that. a young person watching this right now may be like, oh my God, I already had that. So does the parent get to speak to that child and prepare that child for this revelation that's going to come from outside the home? Maybe it's at school, maybe it's when you're with your friends alone, but it's most likely for me it happened at school when I was out of their supervision. That's when it first began. So I wasn't prepared for it. How could you prepare me for, experiencing it in a healthy way? When do I begin? And how do I create out of it, which is what it's really about.
I can tell you how, the great ancient indigenous cultures that were known for being righteous, how they did it. It was done through rites of passage.
Okay.
Meaning, you mentioned Nana Bakan. What I learned of the Akan people is that, you can walk for miles naked as a woman in a dark forest and not be raped. And, that's the Africa that I know, whereby you understand as a man and a woman the idea of not just consent, but other people's legalistic arrangements they have with each other, not just as physical written moral contracts where people have, a language and paper and a writing system, but agreements people make between each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I see as it relates to sex, rape, culture, and consent, it's about somebody trying to dominate somebody else. And because these acts do even come out in sexual encounters between consenting adults, the type of language that is used and these type of things, what people enjoy and these type of things. So, but how do you, I think that what you were really getting at that in life for me is how sex becomes taboo as opposed to it being discussed, and
well ordered,
and well ordered, and how does sex become uplifted? I think that there's an idea that the whole act of sex can be uplifted, and I see this in the Eastern philosophies. So people will, do things like they would meditate and pray together, before they have sex. They might try to invoke a certain energy, deity, God, goddess, etc., principle, even chakra principle, whilst they are having sex. This is what I learned, and this is the type of sex that I wanted to have and that I yearn for, because the transcendental experience when you get the high and you're thinking about, meaning we had experiences where you get ancestral possession and counseling during sex. This is the Africa that I know. And when I found that when you're working in that realm, rape culture seems to get just blasted out the box. So,
because culture is not distorted. So you made a very good point about the dominion. There's this huge movement about ecofeminism. The way that we talk about the earth, we're going to run it till it's dry. We're going to just keep, just frack it and knock this thing out.
It sounds like you're talking about sex right now.
Yeah, knock this thing out. The way that we respond to the earth is in this whole, I'm going to dominate you without your consent and without replenishing you as well. So I think you're right. It's the culture also.
And I feel you're speaking about a lot of actions that are occurring in today's society. We see what we would call, if we thought about it sexually, the rape of the earth. We're looking at all these chemical accidents going on that's destroying supplies of vital resources. So with that going on, the question is that, where do we go from here? But then to take that back to sex, I naturally don't do that, but
what, fracking? You don't frack?
You don't run it till it's dry, Jerry.
I've never done that before, so I'm unfamiliar.
We will never participate in raping of Mother Earth. We want smooth rivers and waters flowing all the time.
Because when I go home, that's what I do, because I have another home from this home, so maybe that's why.
That was really, really a funny way to approach and kind of bring a kind of alchemy and conclusion around it, because I'm glad that we can realize that we have examples around the world of cultures that did things to help to mediate human vices and human virtues, because human beings have both vices and virtues.
Yes, sir.
We have a good angel on the right. We have a bad angel on the left. We have a left hemisphere of the brain. We have a right hemisphere of the brain. We have a yin. We have a yang. We have a dark. We have a light. And we do need both sides for balance. But when you establish a social and moral contract that can be mathematically verifiable, it's like that was rape. The person did not want to have sex with you, you know, and they kept resisting. They were pushing you off, you know.
Can I give my little jingle about it's rape or not, just to close?
Yeah,
yes.
please
Just
do.
Very general,
right?
too.
Yes,
For the general population.
It helps everyone.
Yes.
So yes, an emphatic yes means yes.
Mm-hmm.
No means no. Maybe means no. Drunk and sloppy means no.
Wow.
Flipping out back and forth when you're interacting with them, you don't know where they're coming from. They're changing one to the X right in front of you. The answer is no. So put someone in a cab. Make sure they're able to get home, so that you're not the last person they see. And that helps it. So an emphatic yes, and I think I was joking with Jerry the other day, like, is it sure it's a yes? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Say it again.
And the fourth time, you're like, they put it on paper.
Yeah, man. You know, this has been such a wonderful topic and ended. You know, and I have to say, you know, since we pretty much concluded and brought some alchemy here, be careful with who you party with. Because some people can't control themselves when they get drunk, and this sure give you the wrong signals. You know, that was something that I learned, and it became very, very important with this whole issue of rape, women, and drunkenness. I've never personally experienced anything like this, but I've had not only a woman tell me when she gets drunk, she wants to hump everything in the room.
That's different than rape culture. That's just promiscuity, which is okay. So we don't want to get them mixed.
You know, when I heard people saying, well, she was drunk, I'm like, you know what? That's why, being a traditionalist and stuff like that, I'm like, there's just certain places I'm not going.
And we help each other. So if she's drunk and she wants to have sex with everything that walks through, which is commendable, if she wants to do that, cool. If you just if you want to live a certain principled life, then you help correct that. The answer for this drunk girl is no. For somebody else, could have been very well consenting.
Right. Right. So now you got to start to get into people's history and stuff like that, how they knew each other before that day. Because, for me, if we never broached that subject and I find you drunk and intoxicated and you stay over there, you take me home, and then we, be like, what happened? What was that about? Exactly. Where did that come from? I'm saying some women have said that it just comes out of nowhere. But I think that has a lot to do with self-esteem and stuff like that too.
Right, but we don't want to confuse that drunkenness allows, rape. So men act crazy when they're drunk as well. I've known men that's
really crazy.
Co-workers that are like, whoa, I didn't know you felt that way.
And female, and you have, because
we gotta police each other.
You wanted to talk about, the whole idea of a man being raped. That was that's really, really difficult to prove. Mm-hmm. But a woman likes a man really, really bad. He gets drunk at a party and he's all over her. She's taking that dude home. Like, you gonna wake up and you gonna be in my bed.
And the pressure to perform for men, like you have to
and
take
the pressure, this. If you say no, something wrong with you.
Right.
We can't get into that topic, but you will be considered homosexual from that day forward. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, here we go.
Yes, but
wow, man. Wow, that was a really, really wonderful conversation. That pretty much concludes it for our Alchemy and Commentary. But like a lot of things that we discussed, I think that this subject is going to find a way to work its way back into the future shows, because it's really interesting. Peace. Love and light. Hope everybody enjoyed the show.